As the month of September comes to an end, it is time to look at the big market metrics. How many people played the game this month? How many cases were opened? And what changes occurred in this market this month? All of this and more in this monthly CS2 players opened 33.57 million cases in the last 30 days, up from 32.13 million in August. We saw a steady growth in the active player numbers, and one case just got pushed into the rare pool. Cases are still doing insane volume, and that during a bit of a dip in prices across the board. We've got some clear winners and a few sleepers. Let's break down what people opened, why it changed, and how prices are changing in general. Case opening volume rose modestly month over month. About 1.44 million extra cases were opened in September comparing it to August. Cases are still getting opened at massive amounts. We are at big numbers, especially looking at how many other ways to spend money there are right now. The game's player numbers are still in very good shape as well. They're down a bit from the all-time high, which is to be expected, but over the past 2 months we have seen stable and steady growth of about 5% each month. Overall, a very good sign for the game. We also had a status change this month. Fracture moved from the prime/active drop pool to the rare drop pool on September 17th. That cuts new supply from weekly drops and usually pushes prices upwards over time as the existing stock that is here gets opened. Valve also announced that your final chance to pick up the gallery case, graphic collection and character craft stickers from the armory was here, so they must be leaving soon. More on this in my next video. And finally, Valve also added the Genesis Uplink Terminal, which ultimately changed a lot in how we deal with this market, since they are throwing actively dropping cases up in the air at this point. First of all, the Fever case. This one is still the number one by a mile. It was opened nearly 8.7 million times this month. That is down a couple percent from last month, but it's still by far the biggest amount ever. That massive gold bar at the bottom of the chart tells the story perfectly. Fever dwarfs everything else. It's clear, people don't care if they have to spend a couple stars to get the case with the best knives that is still easily accessible. It's armory only, so anyone can buy it instantly. Hype around the knife finishes is also driving this case because they are still brand new. They are the newest knife finishes to be released in the game as of right now. And it makes sense because they are good. The armory is clearly a big success for Valve. Not only are people paying to get the case with 2 stars, which they paid for indirectly with their pass, but they're also paying again for the key when they open it. And doing that at such a massive rate, clearly Valve are rethinking their whole model right here. Next, we have the active duty cases. Revolution, Dreams and Nightmares, Kilowatt and Recoil. All of these are hanging around in the 3 to 4 million range, which is really quite good for cases. Also, all of these are up. The Kilowatt case is up by almost 20%, and all of the other ones are up by about 8 to 10%. And all of this is of course because they are the default opening my drops cases. When people get them in a game, they just open them and get their gambling fill. And what you can see right here is that most active cases grow and fall with player numbers roughly. More people play the game, more of these get dropped and thus opened. Simple as that. The price for these cases is more interesting. Now that Fracture is discontinued, you can already see people looking at the next case to be discontinued. And even though the Dreams and Nightmares is the oldest one, people seem to clearly think that the Recoil will be discontinued. Just look at both price trends right after Fracture got discontinued. And why? Well, because the Dreams and Nightmares case contains finishes that don't exist elsewhere. And they are still opened about 1 million times more than the Recoil case. It fits in Valve's past trends, and I think I agree with them as well. Next, I want to talk to you about the Genesis Uplink Terminal. Even though, as of right now, the opening numbers for terminals are not accessible to us in the same way that cases are, which is of course because people have the choice in what they get instead of getting it at random, so they cannot do the same calculations. But yeah, I do want to shine light on this, because people are not opening many uplink terminals. I literally checked again today on FloatDB, and this is roughly how many of each item were claimed. And it's not a lot. These numbers show two things very clearly. First off, no one is opening this laptop thing. No one. In total, there are only about 110,000 skins opened. This thing has been out for 2 weeks now. Of course, there are more opened because you can open it and not buy anything. But Valve also doesn't make any money from that. There is also the part where one skin now doesn't give Valve 250, but up to 1,000 or more. But even then, these things cannot be seen as a success at Valve's meeting about this thing. Because this is how many get opened when it's just being released. And the price is already down to $2. No one is interested. And I understand them very well. But secondly, this case has total disregard for regular supply distribution. Think about that for a second. A normal case has expensive items because there are very few of them, and that's because they are rare to get. This case, or whatever you want to call it, however, seems to have more purples opened than blues, and almost the same amount of every skin rarity really. I mean, you can see here there's not a real big difference. You can also really see that this case just lets people buy what they want, which is why there are already 14,000 M4A1S liquidation, but only 5,000 Nova Oculars, even though they are the same rarity. Because no one wants a Nova that looks ugly, but everyone wants the M4 liquidation. Anyway, my short rant aside, let's continue. Anubis collection package. Surprisingly high considering how old it is at this point. And you can't even access it through the armory or whatever. You have to go into the manual shop, buy it there, and then open it. Or buy it on the market, which is even more insane. It makes me wonder if Valve will ever remove it from the store. It's kind of an outlier. I mean, they would have added it to the armory if that had existed at the time, but it didn't yet, so they needed to put it somewhere else. And plus, removing it now would just mean that Valve is essentially saying no to millions and millions of extra free profit. Like, it's literally just free for them. And as long as they don't discontinue it, all of those items are of course gonna stay basically fixed in price. It was, despite all of this, still opened 1.15 million times roughly in the past month, which is up more than 50% from last time. I'm not sure if that's a correct figure, but that's what CS2 case tracker says. Then we have the gallery case. This one is also still being opened at about 1.15 million times each month. This one is down about 4% from last month, which is obviously also why Valve will probably be discontinuing this case soon, as they already announced that. The opening numbers are far smaller than Fever, but it's still a chunky amount considering how long this has been accessible. And finally, I saved the best for last, Fracture, which is now rare. The Fracture case was opened about 3.15 million times this month, up from last month with about 6.4%. It's now in the rare drop pool. Lots of stock still being opened, but there is no new drops coming in, so supply will probably be shrinking quite fast. Expect price growth over the coming months, because its knife selection now only comes from rare cases, pushing demand further up. Since Fracture changed mid-month, expect September to be the last big one before the supply goes down and scarcity increases as we get into the next few months. Expect openings to be quite solid for a while as long as the price stays fairly low. The price did shoot up a bit, but it's already back down because there are a lot of Fracture cases. This case has been in here for years, so expect a lot of them to still be around. Once the price of this case actually starts meeting some other rare cases, it might drop down, but even then, look at Chroma, Gamma, Spectrum. They are still doing very well, even after all this time and all of these price increases. Some cases just keep demand if their knives are exclusive, or gloves for that matter, and they are not being released in new cases. There are some other cases that are quite interesting. Since I was already talking about Spectrum, Chroma and Gamma, let's discuss those three first. Specifically, I'm talking about Spectrum 2, Gamma 2 and Chroma 3, since those are the latest released cases from each of those series. all of those cases back then got a number for how many cases were released with the same knives. So Gamma 2 and Gamma 1 have the same knives in them. That also means that since Gamma 2 is the cheapest, that has most of the demand, although the other case still has a lot of demand as well, which is quite surprising. But anyway, these 3 cases are still a cornerstone of this market, since they are still being opened hundreds of thousands of times each month. Considering that only a couple thousand to a couple tens of thousands of cases of each of these get dropped each month, the supply is still going down quite quickly comparing to how many there are still. Also, I am very interested in these cases because they are the last cases that you can actually look at the statistics of, because once you get into the very low amounts, it starts becoming very unreliable. So overall, these are still doing fairly okay considering prices. If you are looking for some rarer cases to invest into, these are some great things to look into. If you need some other cases to look into, it's basically all of the other recently discontinued cases that were moved to the rare pool. So let me name a few: Clutch, Prisma, Snakebite, and also the Danger Zone case. All of these are still being opened hundreds of thousands of times each month, and they're being dropped barely at all. All of this is of course because they were recently discontinued, which means there's still a lot of supply. And this is also basically what will happen to the Fracture case. Right now, 3.1 million are being opened, but over time it will become a Snakebite where only 600,000 are being opened. And even longer away from now, it might become a Prisma 2 where, for example, there are 440,000 openings. A surprising case actually in this category is the Clutch case. It's quite old. It's actually not recently discontinued. It's quite old comparing to the other cases, and it's also one of the most opened still, because it's at over 500,000, which is actually up from last month. But even last month it was still at the top, because it's opened 530,000 times in September. That is insane. Imagine that there is like 30,000, 40,000, maybe 50,000 being dropped and 500,000 being opened. There are a lot of investors. There are millions and millions and millions of cases. But these are things to look at. I mean, it's not just all cases. I mean, you do have to realize that some cases aren't getting opened a lot. For example, the CS20 case, 170,000. The Horizon case, 160,000. And once you get further back into the old cases, you also start seeing that really expensive cases are not being opened a lot. People do not care about very expensive cases, not the general public. Those are only left to diehard fans, essentially. The YouTubers who are opening them for videos, or other people who have money to burn. And the final case that I'll mention is still the Revolver case. I have always kind of had a soft spot for the Revolver case in my heart, and I still think that it is a good pick. It is sitting at around 150,000 right now, which is decent. It's up from last month significantly, about 35% more. The main reason I'm mentioning this case is because of how old it is. For how old it is still being opened a ton. It is from 2015, and it was discontinued around 2016, which is over 8 years ago now. So then why are people opening this ridiculous case at all? The skins are terrible. It's only Revolver skins? Are you mentally insane? Well, no, because this case is the last case ever released with the original knife finishes. It is the last case that you can legally obtain that will give you the original knife finishes that were released with the first CSGO update. These knife finishes are in the most expensive cases of the game because these were the first. And among those chances is a chance to get the Karambit Blue Gem. Now that chance is very much unlikely, but there will always be people crazy enough to open it for that. Plus, it's just a very nostalgic case. A lot of the OG skins from CS2, or well, CSGO, you can only get from cases like this or older, and all of the other options are way more expensive. If there's another case I didn't mention that you are really interested in, here's the raw numbers for all cases and what they did compared to last month. Overall, things are up and the market is doing well. Don't look too much at the cases that barely get opened too much anymore, since those numbers are very unreliable in my experience. Some months they double, some months they plummet. Overall, prices are down a fair bit on most cases over the last month or two. That is making more people open more cases, and more of the rare cases get opened because of it too. But don't look at this price decrease as a sign that the market has started to fail. In fact, I see this as a big opportunity for a lot of you. Prices always fall locally, but eventually they soar right past their past highs as well, because the system and supply behind all of this don't change. The system works, and Valve will not want to change anything to FU. Don't let your emotions influence your decisions in this market. Be factual and reasoning. That makes a huge difference. My number one thing on the watch list for October is Fracture. I would definitely be watching both the Fracture price trend and the next few opening numbers. We might very well see continued demand for this case as long as Valve doesn't release a new case with the same old knife finishes that it has. Does the open amount shrink sharply? Does market price start stepping up week over week? Well, I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. Apart from that, I'm also watching what Valve will do next when we are talking about cases and uplink terminals. All of that is very interesting. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Lastly, I'm sure we'll all be watching the price trend as it slowly creeps back up, hopefully, or not. I guess it doesn't really matter. In the long term, don't worry about stuff like that. What do you think about all of this? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, you should be watching this next. I talk all about why prices are going so high and why I expect them to be way higher very soon. Apart from that, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if I gave you some kind of value. It's very much appreciated. If you're still watching, you are truly awesome. Thank you. Goodbye.